Hello, everyone, and welcome to our inaugural event for the Lit Club by NAE. My name is Sam Schwartz, and I'm an associate here at New American Economy and also the founder of the Lit Club. For those of you who might not know much about NAE, New American Economy, we are a research and advocacy organization focused on bringing about fairer and smarter immigration legislation and policies at local, statewide, and federal levels. The Lit Club is a new initiative in our arts and culture program as we work to change the narrative around immigration in America. If this is your first time at an NAE event, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to earn your time going forward for future events. If you're a regular here, welcome back, and thank you for being a staple of what makes our arts and culture program successful. Thank you to everyone for learning a new language over the last year of technology. I know a lot of us have struggled with that, myself included, so thank you for making it work to be with us tonight. For this first Lit Club event, we are excited to bring you an intimate conversation between two decorated immigrant authors. Roya Hakakian is the author of our first Lit Club special selection. Her book, out last month, has received positive reviews in the Wall Street Journal, NPR, as well as many of you who have reached out to share your excitement. Here it is, A Beginner's Guide to America. Phuc Tran is the critically acclaimed author of the 2020 debut, Sigh Gone. Also, we hosted Phuc last year for a book event that was truly a treat for all of us. Now let's get going. You can look for me in the Zoom chat as I'll be sharing some more links and insight throughout the conversation. But without further ado, let me introduce Roya Hakakian, reading an excerpt from her sensational book, A Beginner's Guide to America.
Hi, everyone. I've chosen a short passage from a middle chapter in the book. And as you might know, if you've already read the book, this book is put in second person. So it's it sounds like someone or the narrator is offering advice to the reader. And so this
Hey, Roya.
Yeah.
Let me just, I'm hearing some feedback that people can't see you.
Oh.
But I see your camera on. Can you maybe try turning it off and turning it back on?
Sure.
Let me see. Okay, it seems like people can see you now, so carry on.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. It seems like I'm visible, so I will read a short passage from one of the middle chapters in the book. In lieu of haggling, once the most satisfying aspect of any shopping experience in your former homeland, your fellow expatriates have embraced the exercise of returning, which might well be haggling's fair-haired twin. On weekends, they load their spacious trunks with the purchased goods they plan to return, something that was unthinkable where they came from. At first, they even return the things they need, just to see if they can. When this belief gives way to faith in the sanctity of the return policy, they begin to return only what truly needs returning. They had expected to see the suspension bridges, the underwater tunnels, the endless forests, and the bottomless seas. But it is in the exercise of returning goods that is the surest sign of America's greatness to them. The experience of an underwater tunnel lasts only a few minutes. However, the experience of a trial sweatshirt whose price tag scratches against the nape lasts for days. It is why they cherish their receipts and keep them alongside other well-guarded family treasures. Returning items is the proof that the consumer, one of the several manifestations of the citizen, is formidable here. It is the evidence that anything is possible because a one-time decision need not be destiny. You can change your fate here and turn it in for a better one. Taking the oath of allegiance is a rote promise. To stand head high at a customer service counter, receipt in hand, turning in an unwanted garment is an actual step toward claiming one's rights, acting as an entitled citizen would. Even after all these years, each time a reluctant shopkeeper takes an item back, you stagger out in awe, praising God and his most unsung messenger, George Washington. This is one of the many small joys of living in America that only you, privileged with a keen knowledge of despotism, deeply cherish.
Thank you so much, Roya. I couldn't even decide in my brain. I was thinking, hi everyone, I'm Phuc Tran, by the way. I'm so delighted to be joining you here for NAE's inaugural Lit Club conversation and to be joined by the inimitable and incredible Roya Hakakian. I was thinking to myself, what is she going to read? And I love that passage so much. So if, part of crafting this is talking about the book in a way that is not going to spoil it for anybody, but also there's so many craft questions I want to ask. So I'll try to thread that needle. But how are you? I just want to ask how you're doing today. How's your day?
My day was great, and I have been looking forward to talking to you all week.
Oh, good. Me too. Me too. I took so many notes today. So I guess I would love to know how. So I would love to give the audience, I guess the attendees, a little bit of a quick preamble, or would you like to? I guess it's your book, like a sort of like the cheat sheet for what Beginner's Guide to America is.
I'd like to hear your version of
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, I love it because I was reading it. I was thinking, well, so it's written as a satirical guide to the newly arrived person in America, and they're trying to sort of navigate the sort of oddities. It's like this sort of primer for a fish out of water. Like for me, it really struck this like nerdy chord. In that I was reminded at certain parts of like a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? Like the Douglas Adams, like sort of classic, like what if you took like a human and then like sent them out into the galaxy, as a real alien, right? And exploring the universe and the galaxy and all of its oddities. And so I just loved it. So, and I think the magic of the book for me is that it starts out very funny and kind of warm and, sort of part way through. I don't want to ruin it for people, but it does, like, it doesn't, you don't shy away from hard and dark topics. And somehow the humor turns into satire, turns into critique. It's really just like chef's kiss, like so good. I love it so much. Is that fair? Did I do a good job?
Yeah, you did much better job than I would have done. Yes, having read your book this past week, which I thoroughly enjoyed, I realized that the difference between the two of us, even though we're both immigrants, is that you came here as a child, and I came here as a teenager in my late teens. So in some ways, I feel like everything I observed from the moment I arrived was somehow embedded in my mind, and it's very strange because so many things have happened. I arrived here 35 years ago, but there are certain seminal moments that are simply there, and I can access it very easily, like the moment at the airport. I remember precisely the doors swung open, and I thought, oh my God, I'm a Lilliputian in the wrong land, and so because it was all accessible, suddenly in 2016, when I started hearing all the negative rhetoric about immigrants and immigration, and you know, how certain immigrants were bad and certain others were preferable, or that we shouldn't take refugees, or we shouldn't take people who didn't speak English, or didn't have skills. I realized that I was all of those. I didn't speak English, I had no skills, and I had no money. So, you know, I started panicking, thinking, you know, had I come in the wrong year, I would not have been allowed in this country. And what would have happened to me? That it would have been a completely alternative life to the one I have now. And in fact, since I come from Iran, there was a Muslim ban, and Iran was one of the countries that was placed under the Muslim ban. So it made me think long and hard. And it also made me realize, since you're thinking about craft issues, I don't want to respond to a political moment. I don't want to answer to some, you know, political issue. I want to leave something that will endure. And so I had to figure my way around this gigantic topic in ways that I thought will last a presidency, or hopefully even two, which is how this thing came about.
Yeah, tell me about, so was the origin, that was actually my first question, was was the idea for your book, was the impetus, you know, recent political events, or had the idea of it been percolating much longer? I mean, it seems a little bit like a departure from the other things that you had written. So I'm so curious about, you know, about the origins of it, and where it came from.
Well, the origin was really 2016.
Yeah.
It was the Muslim ban. I assume, you know, your own community, you know, Vietnamese American, were also reeling. Mine certainly was, but there was also, as a writer and as an artist, I really felt very strongly that it is not my job, and it doesn't in any way appeal to me to say something to put someone in his or her own place, and or to respond to some immediate brouhaha. I wanted to do something bigger, and so I realized that maybe there's a misunderstanding fundamentally, that people don't really know or can't truly access what the immigrant experience is. In other words, you know, when there was the talk of they come here to rob and, you know, commit crimes and everything, and it immediately, it took me back to my first several months, when all I was trying to do was to catch the right train. That's all I was trying to do. I was trying not to get lost. I was trying to learn that when I get on the subway in New York City, I am on the right track and I don't go in the opposite of my house. And that's all I was trying to do. And I'm relatively intelligent. So it isn't that I was stupid and I couldn't get things, but it's that hard. And so I thought, what if all I tried to do is to make that fundamental visceral experience truly, truly accessible, so that people who have not gone through this can know it, can feel it, or can come very close to it. And could that make a difference? Could that then become a way, you know, a map for people to hold, to know how to see or look at the immigrant, rather than you know, believe or listen to other accounts that was circulating at the time.
Yeah, and I love that. I think like the style choice of writing it in the second person singular, I think was so, like, it closes the gap so much. Like the intimacy is so immediate. Like, you know, not to, you know, like sound too much like freshman year philosophy, but I think it's really like it's like that Martin Buber's like I and you know, like relational space that you enter like immediately with the writing. So I loved it. and
Well, I'm so glad you're bringing that up
oh
because one of the things I did when I first got angry,
yeah,
after the Muslim ban,
yeah.
I wrote a Muslim ban response as an article, as a piece of journalism, and it ran in the Guardian, and the focus of it was two Iranian American artists I knew who, as a result of this, were going to have numerous difficulties. And then I read it and I thought, what's the use of this? It's a piece of, reportage and in third person. I'm pretending to be objective, but I'm really not, and I have to just, try to put on a different voice than the one I'm truly feeling inside. So I thought, what if I really, really mix things up? What if um, I don't use the first person? Because if I use the first person, then I can be written off as one account, right? Because it's easy to say, oh, a singular person's memoir is just, one off. It's just one instance, and then you can say this is an exception and dismiss it. And a third person account was like so many other things that people who were responding to this crisis at the time were writing. So I thought, I don't want to sound like either one of these two. And that's how sort of the idea of the second person came to mind, that, I wanted to do something that jarred people, that made them kind of leave their usual position of reading a magazine or a newspaper and relate to the narrator in a different way, which you aptly put as kind of erasing the space in between.
Yeah, and also you're in this position of expertise, right? Which I also love, right? That like the foreigner, right, is now the expert explaining to the reader, and I think I'm so curious who you think, or did you have in mind who your audience would be, yeah, as you were writing it, right? So I mean, obviously it's tongue in cheek, so it's not the newly arrived refugee, maybe.
I don't know any refugee that can pick up this book, right?
Right, me neither.
Either. Certainly
Right.
not your relatives or mine, right?
My parents would really benefit from it, I think. Still, I might give it to them. Still, yeah. Actually, no, I benefited greatly from it. I really did. I can only imagine how beneficial it would be to anybody else.
I think it makes in some ways the response that you just gave is what I'm getting from second generation immigrants, children of immigrants, or immigrants who've been here and have resettled, have been here for a long time, and they can, they use the book to kind of revisit their own experiences. As you well know now, it's a disguise, right? It's the disguise is we immigrants are having a private conversation, but if the rest of you would like to eavesdrop, that's okay too. And it was I thought that at the end of the day, it was a very immigrantly way of kind of placing your complaints, because we as immigrants do not like to confront people, and that's not simply an immigrant issue. Minorities have a very hard time finding ways of raising their concerns, and so confrontation is never the way, or it rarely is the way. So I think one of the things that we do is we try to be incredibly polite as we air our grievances in a very, very deferential way. And so I thought, could I come up with a very polite and deferential way of airing my grievances while I also, say certain things to these Americans who have been born and raised here and are forgetting how significant their democracy is. I mean, initially, I meant to only speak about immigrants and immigration, but as the book kind of unfolded for me, I realized that democracy was at the heart of everything I had to say. So that kind of crept up on me.
Yeah, I would love to know where, or and maybe you can articulate it for us, where the humor comes from, right? I mean, it's satirical, and for me, when I'm writing and I'm writing in a satirical mode, it's hard for me to not feel like that the fuel source or the wellspring of that is really just cynicism, right? That I'm naming something that is, you know, supposed to be true, but it's not, and there's like a kind of a cynical feel to it, and I think that's something incredible that your book manages to avoid, or that it is funny and hopeful, and it's not. I was reading, it's like, wow, she's really not cynical at all. Like, how does she do it? So I just want to know, you know, where the humor came from, because to me it feels like a really loving place. It's like the humor that comes from like my aunts when they're making fun of me, right? Like, it doesn't come from like a mean place. It's like, we love you, Phuc. And also, like, that haircut, super bad, super bad. Don't wear your hair like that. So I would love to know about your satire.
Well, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
I take that as a huge compliment, and I'm impressed that you see so deeply into this. Well, this isn't something that I've developed in this book. I sat down over 20 years ago to write my memoirs about growing up, you know, a Jewish kid in post-revolutionary Iran. And
that went really well, right? Super smooth.
yes, sort of like your childhood, right?
Yeah, right.
So then I realized that, geez, you know, I don't want to write a dark book. And it wasn't particularly out of concern for the reader. It was because I didn't want to sit at my desk and you know, get up gloomy. You know, I needed to feel like I had found some light at the bottom of everything. So I came to the conclusion that I needed the humor to get through it for myself. And so otherwise the book would have been such a tragic book. It would have been, you know, the story of this country, not very different from, you know, Vietnam, that suddenly, you know, at least for a specific period of history, falls apart. And I didn't want to just tell that story. I mean, that story I had to tell, but it wasn't the only story I wanted to tell. So I realized that if it kills me, I have to find something to feel optimistic about, to feel light about. And I don't mean light as opposed to heavy only. I also mean light as in lightness as opposed to darkness. And I needed it for myself. So I actually, this sounds very ironic, but I had to work very, very hard to find what was funny. It was my creative task. I had to find it because it was the only way that piece of prose was going to work. And so I managed to do that, which is one of the observations that several people made about the memoir. And then I moved on from that book to the story of a series of assassinations in Berlin, Germany. And it's a piece of nonfiction. And again,
also a very light topic, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So again, it was a very, very heavy, dark, tragic topic. And so I thought, I need to do the same thing. And so, you know, people were stunned that I use this, you know, the bits of satire from a renowned satirist, Iranian satirist, at the beginning of every chapter. And someone said, well, take them out. And I said, no, this is political satire. It goes actually to the heart of every chapter, and it's essential to for it to be there. So and you know, people who've read on, I mean, by the time the story finishes, the book finishes, there is a very direct relationship between the, you know, those epigrams at the beginning of every chapter and the events that unfold. I have found all the time that in order to keep myself interested and entertained, I've needed that. But I've also, you know, I think fundamentally, I create art. I write because I want to feel hopeful, because I need to feel that I am contributing some light to this darkness that exists about us, and finding the humor at the bottom of these things is among the tasks that with every book I've set out to do.
Hmm. I would love, thank you for that. I love hearing hearing your process a little bit, the internal process. I'd love to know how much research you did, because like I think the way that you write the book in the second person, and it's so the net is cast so wide, and then you know really smartly, like you pull in little details because you're writing to like sort of the generic immigrant or refugee who's arrived here, and like they could be from south of the border, they could be from Europe, they could be from, you know, Iran, you know, who knows, from Asia. And I'm curious how much, and then I looked at the bibliography, which you include in the back of the book, and I'm curious how much research you did, how much reading you did for yourself. And yeah, I'm just curious about that piece of it.
Yeah. Well, again, I go back to 2016, and all I was hearing was who were the good immigrants that we wanted more of, and who were the bad immigrants we didn't want in our country. So I think there was somebody had said, you know, why are we allowing Iranians to get in? Why don't we take some Norwegians? And it made me think. And again, I was I kind of you know, we all have to think it on two dimensions. One is, you know, the listener to, or the consumer of the daily news, who gets angry and curses at the TV. But then we also listen in our capacities as writers and artists and, you know, reasonable people who don't want to fall into the trap of perpetuating public anger and you know, finding ways of you know, remedy it somehow. So I thought, are we really that different? You know, that by the time a Norwegian, say an Iranian, a Vietnamese, a Mexican is driven out of his or her homeland by forces of, you know, unemployment or environmental change or religious persecution or ethnic persecution, whatever it is, by the time we are uprooted against our own desires to remain where we are, and we arrive here, does it really matter where we come from? Because I think people take for granted that no matter where we come from, this experience of being driven out, you know, even against our will, you know, it's a choice we don't make. It's a choice that is imposed upon us by our circumstances, and then we have to cross continents and get here, and then learn a language, find a job, you know, not get lost on the subway. It's so cataclysmic that we almost, you know, become unanimously the same, that it has a way of filtering all of us through this singular you know, layer of experience, that by the time we're on the other side of it, we are far more similar than we're different. And of course, I'm not trying to say, you know, our differences don't matter. Our differences matter. But there is also a great shared overlapping treasure trove of experiences that we all undergo, because the cataclysmic experience affects us all as humans, not as, various ethnicities. And that is what I tried to capture. I wanted to say that yes, we're different, but this process makes us very similar. And you may want more Norwegians, or you may want more, less Africans, or you may want, whatever. It really matters very little, because at the end, it's how we arrive, how we're welcome, how it is that we find our way here, that makes all the difference in the world. So I went and read and read and read. It was ridiculous, and I couldn't get enough of it. I mean, I wish I had found yours, although um, I should have read your parents' memoir, some of which comes through your own account. But I just read so many, and it was as if I was taking everything that dovetailed with what I knew, and putting it in a giant file of shared experiences, whether it was the account of undocumented immigrants in this country, or Polish immigrants, Jewish immigrants from 60, 70 years ago, Arab immigrants, whatever. If I found those common experiences, I saved them all, and I created a narrative where these overlapping experiences coincided and made up the book. And
I love, yeah, no, sorry, go ahead. No, sorry.
of course, there are also a lot of differences, but let other people write about the differences. I wanted to write about what we all have in common.
Yeah, and I think and I love that there's a tension for me in the idea that immigration is sort of like the common denominator for the American experience, and yet I think there's this proximity to the actual event of immigration that divides so many of us, right? That there are people here who've been here for 3 generations, right? And then there are people who are newly arrived here. And for me, I think like the tension that, as I was reading your book, was this idea of, who gets to wear the mantle or claim to be really American. To me, it feels like the people most sort of closest to the ground zero of the immigration experience, who like overcame all these incredible hurdles, right? To be American or to get here, have a fresher recall and are closer to that experience, and yet, right, you see this idea of people cloaking themselves in this idea of being a patriot, right? And what does it mean to be a patriot? And what does it mean to be a real American? I think there's for me, like, just thinking about those ideas is so interesting. I wonder if you have thoughts about, the idea of the tension between being a patriot and the mantle of being a real American or an authentic American.
So this is really interesting, because I have somebody very close to me who I helped receive a green card, is going to take her citizenship test tomorrow. And I have watched her over the past 6 months study her civics so that she can prepare for the exam. And of course, I took the exam myself. And so every day she calls me or comes by and says, who is the, minority leader in the Senate? And, what is, who wrote the, the Declaration of Independence? And she's been, and she asks me questions that I don't have answers to. So we sit together and I, Google stuff and I start reading. And it has occurred to me that I regret the fact that the native-born Americans don't undergo such a process. That I think there's something fundamentally unjust, or maybe fundamentally also insufficient to claim citizenship or Americanness if you haven't worked for it. And so I think if we are, any of us can claim the mantle, so to speak, it has to be those of us who have really worked hard for this. And I know that every single one of us who has had to take the exam, or forget the exam, I mean, just the entrance process alone, all the poking and prodding and medical tests and application after application. I mean, does anyone know that the citizenship exam or the citizenship application is about 30 plus pages? I mean, when was the last time that someone who was born and has had to, go through all that, have doctors, look at all sorts of, test results from various medical examinations, and put that together with essays and short answers and multiple choice answers and birth certificates and college results, all of these things that you don't even do in order to take your SATs or even enter college. And that's probably the greatest hurdle that Americans put themselves through. It's not even half of what we as immigrants have to do in order to apply and be vetted and all of that. And I was thinking, it isn't just the unfairness, it's also that it creates a sense of seriousness in us, a sense of commitment that that always comes with something that you work hard for.
For sure. Yeah.
And so we work hard for this. We work hard because we have to translate every document, and we have to make sure it has the stamp of approval from whatever agency, and then submit all these things, and then the fingerprints and the medical exams and the 30-page application, and then the test, and then you show up and you have to say the whatever it is that you have to say, to take the oath of allegiance, all these things.
Right. It's so easy to be an American, right? You didn't just sneak across the border. Yeah.
The native born Americans are born and then they're Americans.
Right. Geography is destiny, right? Yeah.
It's there's the disparity is huge, but I think the disparity also has an effect that we come to cherish this. We are forced to think about it at every small stage. Do I really want this? Do I really want this? You can't believe how many Middle Eastern immigrants I've known who say they have asked me for a clearance from the FBI for the third time, and because last names kind of get mixed up, and so someone's last name is flagged in the system, and they have to prove that they have never been in, I don't know, ISIS country in the Middle East, and they have to provide proof that they've been elsewhere all along. So and I've heard my friends say, if they ask me one more time, I will just say, forget it, I won't do it. But in the process of each time, giving yet one more piece of evidence that you're good enough, and answering one more question, you become more and more committed. You become more and more serious. And I think if anybody is earning anything, it's those of us who work for this American title.
Absolutely. So I got a note from Sam that we should wrap up for audience Q&A. So I want to do my speed round though, Roya, no pressure. I'm just going to ask you to choose between two things. It's a list of 5 things. And if you answer correctly, then we can be friends. But if you don't, that's okay. Not everyone needs to be my friend.
To be friends, so
okay, are you ready? All right, ready? So you just pick one of these 2 things, right? Beach or mountains?
Beach.
Cake or pie?
Pie.
The Beatles or the Rolling Stones?
Rolling Stone, Beatles.
uh,
That's hard.
Sweet or salty?
Sweet.
Poetry or prose?
Poetry.
Okay. All right, Sam, take it away.
Thank you.
Roya, nice job. We can be friends.
Yes, good.
Don't worry, I don't think the audience has asked any questions as tough as Beatles or Rolling Stones. So you're in the clear. You've already gotten the hardest one. All right, let's start with this. We got one question from an audience member who asked, what do you hope people born in America might learn through the eyes of an immigrant?
I think the most important one that at this particular moment in the history of America, given what we're going through, I want to encourage people to try to recognize the manifestations of democracy in our daily lives, not as something that happens every 4 years when we go to elect somebody or vote, but as a daily exercise, because there are so many signs that we miss, that these are the gifts of democracy. I mean, that satirical passage I read about returning items. I don't just do that because it's funny. I do it because I want to remind the native born who don't see this as a manifestation of the American democracy to become aware that there are so many small ways in which this system, however flawed and with however many shortcomings, manifests itself in many small ways. And we as immigrants needed to work in order to continue to be here. So if the native born recognize all these little manifestations of the American democracy in the routine of ways that things are set up here, then we're safer. Because as long as democracy works, then we can rely on it to be good to us. And I think that's the one thing that I want people to come away, to take away from this book.
Thank you. All right, let's see. Another question. Here we go. In your book, you talk about feeling that America as a whole is more welcoming of immigrants than almost any other place in the world, which may surprise some Americans who feel that our country is not as welcoming as it could and maybe should be. How do you square those potentially differing views?
Well, that's probably because those people who think that America is not welcoming enough, and certainly America can be more welcoming. It's the destination is nirvana. It's a place that we have to strive to get to. I don't think we're doing it perfectly right, and I have so many examples to cite to show that we're not doing the best job we can possibly do. But compared to other Western nations, if you are a refugee, which I have been in Europe prior to coming here, it can be very, very hard to be from a Middle Eastern country or from another culture where it's clear that you have been forced out, and it becomes very unpleasant to live in those places. I think I think we've done a better job than other Western nations, which isn't to say that we can't do, we ought not to even improve.
Great. All right, so we have a lot more questions and not so much time. So I'm gonna ask if you can keep the answers brief so we can get to as many questions as possible. The next question is, are there certain parts of your book that you specifically shared with family or friends who are also immigrants that you wanted to get their feedback on before including in the book?
Yes, I have shown parts of the book to people whose memories or recollections or stories I've used to make sure it's true to the original. And that's usually what I do as a journalist.
Great. And then I guess that leads into the next question, which is how much of the book is based on your story and how much is based on other narratives and other people's stories?
So I thought about this a great deal. It's not fiction, it's not nonfiction. It has it has elements of a memoir because some of it is my own, but I've borrowed from other people, and in certain places I've made up dialogues. Right, so it's a patchwork. It's memoir superimposed on non-fictional accounts, superimposed on snippets of made up fictional moments. And I wanted to do that because this is who we are as immigrants. This is who we are, especially as refugees. We are a patchwork. We have to piece life together from anything that we can get our hands on. And I wanted my prose to reflect that. We're not a homogeneous, clean, simple, defined people. Our lives have been interrupted, and we have tried to get from one country to the next, from one application to the next. And as a result, we have made things up as we have gone along. And that's precisely what the prose is all about. And I wanted it to confuse people and say, I have no idea what the hell she's doing, but all I'm doing is that I'm refusing to adhere to a singular genre, because that's not what the immigrant's life is.
Amazing. And then I guess kind of that leads into this next question. When did you feel a sense of belonging in America, and what does belonging look or feel like to you?
Well,
No small question.
The first moment actually came, and I didn't realize it then, but I have only been able to look at it from, in hindsight and recognize it. It was in the early 1990s, and I had always wanted to be a writer. I had never wanted to be anything else, but I had no English, and I thought it isn't something I could do. But then I loved it so much that I thought, I gotta just, muster my courage and do something. So I was at Brooklyn College, and Allen Ginsberg, the Beat poet, was a professor there. So I knocked on his door one day and I said, I want to be in your class. And he said, groovy. And I said, what can I do? And he said, you have to submit 30 poems. And I said, great, I have more than 30 poems. And I had published a book of poetry in Persian. So I gave him my book of poetry in Persian. And he said, double groovy, you're welcome to go into my class. And so I think it was a great moment, because I thought, this guy who couldn't read anything I'd given him, gave me a pass. And I, realized that there's a community, an intellectual community, that I could find my way into, and that's where it all started.
Awesome. That was a great story. Here's another question. How do you balance the idea of needing to make things up as you go, alone in a new world, with growth, empowerment, embrace of culture versus assimilation, and kind of just agreeing with what's already the status quo? And how does it feel to convey that in your writing?
I guess one of the important things that 2016 has done to me is that I'm no longer interested in how people define something I do or say. When people say, are you leftist or rightist? Are you Democrat or Republican? Do you assimilate or did you not assimilate? I don't answer these questions anymore. I say, ask me my opinion about, something, whatever it is that's your concern. I'll tell you my opinion, and then you can decide what I am. You can put me in a box, but I don't live inside that box. So, I think I was concerned about assimilation, and many of us as immigrants can be concerned about assimilation. But the truth is that I have come to recognize that I don't have to be afraid of these things. I can, shape a life and let other people decide how they want to define me. The most important takeaway from all this is that we as Americans have allowed, at least thus far, with certain exceptions, our immigrant communities to continue their practices, be who they are, and then hyphenate themselves and put themselves next to us. And I think that to me, if it works better than it already does, if it can improve upon it, is an ideal world in which I can carry on with my own cultural exercises, but I can also be part of a whole. And if that's assimilation, then I'm for it.
Great. So we're going to do two more questions. The second to last one is, over the past decade or so, with the proliferation of the internet and social media, it feels like the world is becoming smaller and content across countries is more accessible. Do you see your insights from the book as, will they be changing with more recently arrived immigrants?
I don't think so. I think the more information, at least regarding this book, I've gathered, the more I have identified, again, those overlapping experiences and similarities. And I say that we have far more in common than, and social media just attests to that, in my view. However, what I think we ought to be paying more attention to is that massive numbers of populations are either on the move or will be, because of crises that are unfolding. And I think we all need to be thinking about the problem of population movements far more seriously than we are now.
Great. And then this last one, which I'm hoping will leave us on an optimistic and positive note, but no pressure. How optimistic are you about the future of American democracy and its treatment of immigrants?
I'm very optimistic, and I don't say that just because I want to leave people happy. I say that in the book too. The American immigration cycles has gone through bad moments, but it always comes out of them. And we always end up recognizing that we have committed wrongs, and we should not commit the wrongs. We should try to avoid them, but we always go back and recognize and try to do better. And I think that's great. That's really all we can expect from a system that isn't perfect, but has done a relatively good job of incorporating people. So I think, yes, we have discriminated against everybody. And I find that actually heartwarming. We've discriminated against, the Germans, we have disliked the Irish, we have turned away Jews, we have had, the Chinese Exclusion Act. At least we can all take heart in the fact that nobody's special. We extend the right to discriminate against everybody all the time, and extend it to all communities. And so that means that we have some kind of a resistance, but one way or another, we have gotten over them, some sooner rather than later. And I think that's a promising sign.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really end this any better than that. I mean, we just have a few comments saying thank you for a great conversation, that it was double groovy, of course. And thank you to everyone for joining us for this inaugural event from the Lit Club. Stay on the lookout in your emails for future events and future selections. And we will always keep our door open for both of you, Phuc and Roya. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for writing great books, both of you. And Everyone have a great rest of your night. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks, everybody.